I'm listening to the segment. I'm looking at Cabbie. The man never ages, for starters.
Appreciate you.
It's true.
Thank you, sir.
And man, it's memory lane for me, right? Cabbie was a one-take wonder back in the big studio at TSN.
I'm not sure that's true, Brian.
One take.
Hey, the hockey guys, we just sit in the hallway when Cabbie was taping some stuff, and we just,
a lie.
the notepads, we'd be taking notes, going, "Okay, that was pretty smooth." You know, the mannerisms, the gestures, the way you kind of look over here off camera. That Cabbie is top.
It's a natural.
Listen, I appreciate the embellishment, but I'm a 47 take wonder. I think I held them up multiple times. Like, when is this guy going to get out of the studio? And I'm recording links for Cabbie Presents, and these guys are like pacing. Like, when is this friggin' dude? 5 links shouldn't take 45 minutes. So thank you for the embellishment.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Great to see you.
How are you guys doing? How are we doing?
Well, back at 1 a.m. This morning from Seattle. It was absolutely electric. I'm sure you've been paying attention. The Jays felt like they might be out on a long walk here against Seattle. It was not going to go well until it went very, very well, and all of a sudden it's 2-2. So have you been watching? Is it got your attention?
Well, it kind of does, yes. So just to give you an example of the hype that's around this team, and not just, obviously Blue Jays fans hype. It's real. It's North American and it's global. So we had a regional game last night, the Maple Leafs and the New York Rangers. And I'm battling something. You guys know me. I'm the king of the mute switch because I'm always coughing, clearing my throat. I've always got something going on. So I can feel the tickle in my throat all the way through this game. Second intermission, part of my job is to do an insider trading segment with James Duthie. All right, well, he's going to the highlights of what's going on around the NHL. And just as he's getting into them, I can feel something coming. And I don't know, Rhett, maybe you don't know this because you haven't been a broadcaster most of your life. But for those of us who have, that's nightmare stuff, right? There's nothing I can do about it. So Duthie looks over to me as he's about to come into the segment to say, Darren Dreger joins us now, mini insider trading. And Dregs, let's talk about the Leafs and Keith Belly and da-da-da-da. I can't even open my mouth because I know I can't talk. My vocal cords have seized. So he actually starts telling the story that I'm supposed to tell. He does it Duthie's the best, right? So that buys me about 20 seconds. I try and hack it out. Well, then he looks at me and goes, "You good?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm good." The Toronto Maple Leafs are trying to go all in this year. I can't straighten out. So the only thing that saved me back to the Blue Jays was obviously the game is going on. The Jays game is going on. And I was sure I was going to get torched on social media or, is Dreger alive, that kind of stuff. I think maybe 10 people noticed. So
everyone was watching the game.
Jays. I want the Jays to go to the World Series. They saved me last night.
Jack texted about the Steelers game last night to our group chat. And I'm like, Jack, nobody's watching the
No one is watching the icy hot bowl.
No.
The 41-year-old people were watching. It was not Flacco and Rodgers. It was Scherzer last night. We'll start with the Flames. They're last in the league right now that had a real tough time scoring goals. What should the level of concern be? Or is there maybe a different way to look at it where it's like, hey, this could be a high pick this year, which could be helpful?
Well, they're 5 games in, right? So nobody's pushing a panic button, but all of the things that we talked about coming into the season are real right now, and they can change. They can flip on a dime here. And, maybe 10 games from now, we're having a completely different conversation. It sounds like Huberdeau is going to be good to go as early as the weekend here. So that'll be good news for the Calgary Flames, or should be, because they can't score. Their offense is dried up. Again, an area that everybody knew was going to have to pick up where it left off at the end of last year. I don't know how you guys would rate goaltending. Cooley looked not bad. He didn't have a very good preseason, but he didn't look bad. Dustin Wolf is the savior for the Calgary Flames, as he was last year. And I think this is fair in saying that, aside from the first game, he's been average. And unfortunately, when you're not scoring and collectively your goaltending isn't standing on its head and bailing you out of games, you're not left with much. So I wouldn't say that it's panic time yet in Calgary, but 5 games from now, 10 games from now, if they're still in the same situation, they're not scoring, the goaltending is this, and they can't keep the puck out of their own net, then yeah, I think the level of concern, at least inside that organization, is going to climb.
I know Rasmus has been the big talking point all year. We don't need to get too far into it, but like, do you see a world where a trade in the fall makes sense, or is this league always just going to be like new year, see where the standings are, you get better values at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I would still lean. But we also know when you get to U.S. Thanksgiving, many teams look at what they have or don't have, and they're like, all right, maybe we need to do something a little bit more drastic. But the only way that you trade Rasmus Andersson, I think, at that stage, is if somebody steps up with a premium. I know that going into the season, both the player and the Calgary Flames thought that they'd just leave it settle for a while. And we're also open to the idea that, hey, if things go well, maybe better than expected, the door is always open. Now, the smart money is on a Rasmus Andersson trade, and that hasn't changed for me. But there is still that remote possibility that he extends. I mean, you guys be the judge. You scrutinize the Flames a lot closer than I do. He looks pretty good to me, right? I mean, I know he went into training camp with the right frame of mind through the preseason. He can be a bit of a smart aleck from time to time, but he's a gritty dude with a great personality. He's very, very good in that room. But how motivated is he? And in part, that helps explain why he's playing the way he's playing. I think he's playing very, very well. He's in a contract here, and he wants to make sure that he's putting himself in the best environment to collect that big contract, either from Calgary or from another club, and to make sure that the trade interest in him stays as high as it's ever been. And I think that's all real.
Okay. Rhett was talking about Evan Bouchard just before you got on. He's one of those polarizing defensemen. Incredible offensive instincts, and a guy that you're just left scratching your head sometimes at the mistakes, the D zone.
They're beauties yesterday.
And he's got 4 years. He's got his new deal from the Oilers, and look, this team will be measured in the spring, not now. But like, it's an interesting talking point. They lose to the Islanders last night.
Well, look, I know people who watch that game very, very closely, and it's up there. It's up there with one of the worst showings in a long, long time. And I think what frustrates people from time to time, probably fans more than anything, is how calm Bouchard can be when he's making those colossal mistakes, right? It's almost like, well, stuff happens. I'll be better next shift. And then, no, you're not better the next shift. And it was just a calamity of errors last night for Evan Bouchard for the Oilers. I mean, but again, in fairness, you do measure the body of the work. He's one of those players that seems to attract more negativity. But when he's playing and when he's going, man, he is just lights out good, especially offensively. The problem with his resume is, his blunders defensively are just next level. They're next level. And that was one of those last night. And with all due respect, I mean, Evan Bouchard obviously is in the Olympic conversation. For sure he would be and deserves to be. But how many games like that can you put together early in the season before management of Canada goes, ooh?
Can I jump in on that? Because I don't think there's any way you can take him to the Olympics. And I'm not saying that because you can't run the risk in a one-game scenario where this guy turns the puck over just haphazardly. And I get how good he is. Yeah. But there's too many other good players as good that don't do that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
It kind of feels like PK Subban to me a bit. Like, this was a very, very high ceiling offensive guy, but they just wondered about, like, geez, like, is there too much risk in terms of the defensive?
You don't need his offensive upside doesn't override his mistakes in that type of scenario.
No,
the Oilers, and when you're doing an 82-game season, and absolutely. In a short tournament, no way.
No, and then you're not going to take him primarily for the power play, for that big shot from the point, because you have other players who are terrific power play quarterbacks in the NHL. Yeah, of course, of course. And how much time is he going to get, on that power play anyway? I mean, it's. I recall as we're having this conversation back to 2010, and a lot has changed since then, but that was Yzerman and Babcock, and their design of Team Canada going into Vancouver was not, hey, we need to flood our roster full of players who are going to be game breakers and outscore our mistakes. It was exactly the opposite. And you look up front, all the centermen that they had on that team, right? But more importantly, their philosophy going in, and maybe it was a mistake, but hey, Crosby scored the golden goal and it worked out well in the end, was we're fine with winning a 2-1 hockey game. Right. We're good with that. We need to be able to defend, keep the puck out of our net, and get the greasy and timely goals when we need that. So I think that speaks to the Canadian roster in many different forms, but doesn't bode well for guys like Evan Bouchard.
Do you want to talk about the Olympics? Because what's going on with the rink over there? I heard that it's an absolute disaster and that it's like this, it's not even close. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the NHL, the PA, the IOC would have you to believe, no, there's nothing to see here. Everybody move on. It'll be fine. That's because they don't like the idea of fear mongering, because what happens when that narrative gets out there? The reality is the facility is not ready. And I had a conversation with somebody close to the international scene this morning who say it's not even close to being ready. They're hoping that it could be ready as early as December, and they're hoping that they'll be able to have a test event in the facility in January. But let's just play that what if game for a moment. What if it isn't ready? And what if they're not able to test it in January? I mean, we're talking about NHL players here, the best of the best, flooding into Italy to play on the ultimate world stage. So I'm sure that the PA and the NHL will continue to push as hard as they can, push the IOC directly, push the NHL to push the IOC directly. I know that Canada, I think it was Pete DeBoer was part of the entourage. He's got some time on his hands now, but he was part of the entourage that was in Italy a week or two ago. So they would have had a firsthand look at where the facility is, the accommodations and all of that. But it's a growing concern. I mean, it doesn't have to be top notch. I mean, there are some sacrifices that every Olympic athlete has to make, including the mega millionaires of pro sport, National Hockey League. All right. But we're talking about maybe sacrificing some creature comforts. Maybe you don't have the king size bed, that sort of stuff. Obviously in the Olympic Village, you don't have that. But come on, your arena, your venue to play on and compete on has to be up to snuff. Otherwise, it gets to be potentially dangerous. I don't know. Well, so we'll have to watch it almost week by week.
And that's just not my thoughts. I heard someone else talking about this. You could put up boards and ice, and the guys could go play. But if the infrastructure to produce a show and portray and send that across the country and for people to watch, why the hell is the NHL going over there if they're not going to get anything out of it, right? Like if that's not in place, okay, we got boards and we got ice and they're playing. Yeah, but we can't run a camera and broadcast this event. Like I heard that's part of as big an issue.
Probably. Yeah, probably. And look, again, it was not a shoe-in slam dunk that Gary Bettman and the National Hockey League were going to reach agreement to have the National Hockey League players go back to the Olympics. And a lot of what we've just talked about, I'm sure, was on the high list of concerns that the commissioner's office had. Now, Marty Walsh and the National Hockey League Players Association has felt strongly for a considerable amount of time that NHL players had to go back to the Olympics. Connor McDavid, the faces of the sport internationally, wanted to compete best on best at the Olympics. Okay, well, they got that. There were concessions made by NHL owners to make it happen. So now, I'm thinking that Commissioner Bettman is like, Marty, I told you, man. It's one thing when the Olympics are in North America and we control the environment. And keep in mind, that's an NHL-sized arena. It's supposed to be. So, I'm repeating myself, but I'm sure that both the league and the Players Association are keeping close tabs on this. I expect it'll get done, it'll have to get done. But as we're having this conversation today, there are some concerns.
We won't hear about it for 10 years of how bad it was. They'll present it. It'll be fine.
30 for 30 doc.
Honestly, fellas, like this is the story of every Olympics. Summer and winter. Venues aren't ready. Like there was not a roof on the swimming thing at Athens. They always find a way. They play the anthems. We start to cry and we fall in love with it all. Like it's always late because it's the Olympics and it's always late.
The rooms in Sochi, you had like terrible accommodations. The doors are like falling off and stuff like that. Make out of like it was worse than IKEA quality.
Sure.
Disparage IKEA. I love a good dresser.
Sorry.
Have you seen much of Schaefer? The reviews have been rave from his early action, the first overall pick from last summer with the Islanders.
Yeah, I love this kid. And what's not to love? I guess I'd be though firmly in the camp of okay, let's just pump the brakes here. Let's let this kid develop and see where he gets. But when you have an NHL coach, Scott Arniel of the Winnipeg Jets, who made the comparison to Cale Makar. Now he's talking purely from a skating perspective. And in fairness to Arnie, he's talking about a real minute sample size of watching this young man and seeing what he saw firsthand against the Winnipeg Jets. So I'm okay with it. I mean, this kid has an abundance of confidence in a good way. He's not a cocky person. He's not a cocky hockey player, but he's not afraid to show his skill set. So I am looking forward to seeing how he develops. And it feels like he is ultimately, if you want to really long-term project, it feels like he's somewhere in that, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar sort of category. But if he develops to that level, is he going to have the explosiveness of Makar? Probably not. That's a tough one. But maybe he defends as well as Quinn Hughes does. I mean, if he's a combination of both those two superstar defensemen, then Schaefer is going to turn out to be elite, and he's certainly on that path.
That's amazing. You mentioned, or Ryan mentioned Rasmus Andersson being in the final year of his deal.
Yeah.
Eichel, Kaprizov, Kyle Connor re-signed with their teams. Martin Necas is in the final year of his deal. Yeah. How heavy do you think the bag will weigh for him on July 1st?
And he's going to get it in Colorado.
Either Colorado or some other
Well, they
team.
didn't want to pay Randa, and now it looks like they're going to have to pay the same amount to keep Necas if they're going to keep him, Drake.
What do you think?
Absolutely. And frankly, it's the cost of doing business. But, Marty Necas is going to have to probably make a decision here, right? Kirill Kaprizov wasn't taking less than he knew he was worth, and his agent was demanding. Okay, well, that's fine. He got that from the Minnesota Wild because he also knew he had considerable leverage. The Minnesota Wild are unique in that they recognize that they can't ever replace Kaprizov. I don't know that the Colorado Avalanche feel the same about Marty Necas. They certainly didn't about Mikko Rantanen. And that's why Mikko Rantanen was surprised as anyone when he was traded. He felt like, as he said, he felt like there was a negotiation that really was just getting started until it was over and he was being dealt to the Carolina Hurricanes. So this is the one thing that interests me, though, guys, not to make this always about the numbers. When it comes down to star and superstar players, of course, it boils down to the numbers. What does the structure of the deal look like? How much signing bonus money is Marty Necas going to be able to draw out of the Colorado Avalanche? But Colorado is also one of those teams, which is interesting considering how wealthy ownership is in Colorado. One of those teams that is pretty budget sensitive. Not necessarily cap sensitive. There's a difference there, right? And we're going to see that gap between the haves and the have-nots. I think we're going to see that increase over time here. So the salary cap jumps to 104 next year, 113 the year after that, and then it'll climb exponentially after that. And I've had owners recently tell me, owners for big teams in the NHL, that's their concern. The health of the league is terrific, but the gap is widening because there are teams like Colorado that aren't going to spend it. Now, Colorado's done an excellent job of keeping their nucleus in place, making tough calls as they did on Rantanen. Let's see what they do on Marty Necas. It feels like they've kind of got to make that deal happen, but they're more or less a budget team, so it could get interesting.
How do these, because the Sabres can't pay $110 million.
No,
they don't
Jets
generate.
Too,
but,
yeah.
But I don't know the implications in the CBA of how, is there revenue sharing?
There is.
So that you can get there.
Yeah.
But
There
the
is.
Sens alone can't. And is that going to move teams around? Like this, I was actually
could.
going to ask because it's a personal interest, and I played with Sabres. I love the Sabres.
Yeah.
What the hell are Sabres going to do this year and long term? Because these are issues.
Yeah, and there's always the sale rumors around the Buffalo Sabres with Terry Pagula, right? Always. They're always out there. I mean, we know he owns the Buffalo Bills, his primary focus, all of that. He's committed to the Buffalo Sabres, but I get two of those
to a certain
year.
extent.
Yeah, I get two of those a year. And you know, if they're brutal again this year, and changes are imminent in the front office, then maybe we're having a different conversation towards the end of the year. I need somebody way smarter than me with a commerce degree to do a full long feature on the changes that are made to the revenue share system. I know changes have been made. Significant changes have been made. So smaller market teams like Buffalo, 100% the Winnipeg Jets, are protected. I don't know what the mechanisms are to make that so. And how does that translate into hard dollars? Like, what are we talking about? How many millions of dollars in revenue sharing do those teams take out? I don't know, but I know for Winnipeg specifically, it was a real big deal in renegotiating the collective bargaining agreement and getting that element included. Big deal in the sense that long-term survival in Winnipeg was more or less on the line.
What's hot around the league? Like, what are you getting calls on? What are you watching?
Kevin Adams' seat is hot.
And back to Buffalo. Like, geez, it's owner, it's GM, it's coach. It's 14 years of no playoffs.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with Tage Thompson?
Well, Alex Tuck, his deal is up. Look, I mean, one game where you score 8 goals doesn't erase all of the woes, and maybe that gives a bit of relief in that market from a fan base perspective, but they're still feeling it. No question about that.
Well, part of the thing, isn't part of it just the way they came out? Like, it wasn't even that they didn't score. There was it was flat, and no compete. I mean, your coach early on is going, Jesus Christ, we can't. These guys don't even try. I'm saying that, but it came across that way.
It 100% did. But you know what? But people around the league notice that. And I'm talking about other coaches, other executives, and players. Right? Your general manager is the architect of your roster, supported by ownership. Your coach coaches. That's what he does. At the end of the day, it's the guys with the skates on that control how hard they compete and what their execution looks like. Kevin Adams doesn't control that, but Kevin Adams has had a tremendously long runway as general manager in Buffalo. So if he gets dispatched, he cannot look back and go, yeah, I didn't have enough time. I didn't have the autonomy that I needed. I mean, that's, does it help or does it hinder when you've got Jarmo Kekalainen who's just
sitting there? It reminds me of when Easter was here and they had Daryl, and it was like, why is this guy taking my job? Like, it's got to be disconcerting for Adams.
Yeah. So what, to answer your question about what's hot around the league, I mean, really it's in part Buffalo, in part Calgary, the teams that have sagged right out of the gate. LA is surprising. Yeah, no question about that. But then you look on the flip side, I think we all thought Detroit was going to be better. I think we all thought that maybe the Montreal Canadiens had made a step, right? Did anyone think the New York Rangers were going to be this bad?
Shut out 3 in a row at home.
They were 2-0 on the road going into Toronto, and they earned a point against the Leafs because of the overtime loss. But they can't score, which is mind-boggling, really. But for me, they're a bit of an outlier because I'm a disciple of Mike Sullivan. I think he's a fantastic head coach. So I think this is the tinkering, and he's going to find a way. So the hot stuff around the league because of some of these poor starts is, you do look at Florida. Now they've got 4 guys with long-term injury with the add of Kulikov and Nosek. They pick up Sabrango off waivers, but that's not going to move the needle much. So what's Billy Zito going to be up to? And then you add the Brady Tkachuk, surgery to his right thumb into that equation. And Ottawa was another team that has been sagging out of the gate, right? Chemistry isn't there. The execution isn't there, but you can't wave your magic wand and bring in a high level player. You don't replace the players that I've just talked about, but that doesn't mean that there is multiple conversations happening with many general managers about some of the possibilities that could be in play down the road.
Yeah, fair enough. What's the weekend look like for you, Dregs? What do you got going on? You got some meat on the smoker
baseball?
or what?
Yeah,
Jason
baseball,
6 or Jason
football.
7, sir.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see if that plays out. I hope so. Yeah, baseball, football, and just hockey. That's all I do. Nothing. My kid moved west, so
Really?
yeah. So the smoker, I'm gonna have to get creative. Like, there's nothing worse than putting like a piece of meat like that big on a smoker. Forget it. Like, but I guess I could put a big hunk on there and just share it with the neighbors. So nothing planned, but that could happen.
That's a short friend bus you got there.
Yeah, seriously. Awful.
Yeah. Hey, buddies, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Also, if you could throw in a like and subscribe, it does help us out with what it is we are doing. And check out more at flamesnation.ca.